a lot of static too. It's nuts. Okay, we were waiting for Quentin, but he's not here, so we're going to start. I mean, Quentin.
Wish I wasn't here.
No, I really wish you're here. Sorry, it's Warren. We're waiting on Warren, but he's not here. So there he is.
There he is.
We were waiting, but just starting.
I like to do that sort of thing.
I'm going to start while you set up. This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is called to order. May we have roll call, please? Yes?
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. We will now have a moment of silence. Thank you. Please rise for the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda, we have public comment. Please come to the podium and state your name and address and sign in, sorry. Do we have any public comment tonight?
Leslie Feigl, Livingston Chamber of Commerce CEO, and 303 East Park Street. So I'm bringing up tonight the parade. I had a recent phone call with MDT Kyle DeMars, and it was in regards to a complete unrelated matter. We're trying to get traffic counts just for our basic numbers that we use for some of our reporting over the year. And I told him, that I would be talking to him soon in regards to the parade. And my concern is that this parade last year had over 11,000 people. In Park County, we had Livingston, about $185 million in visitor tourism money spent here. The 1 week of the parade and the rodeo as a major chunk of that. And I'm on the phone with an entity that signs off for over 58 years for the 93rd annual parade, going all the way up to Park Street and coming down, going up Second, coming across Park and all the way down. That's 3 blocks of businesses. And he informs me that I have to talk with the city manager, who has already spoken with him, and I haven't even turned in the application yet, saying that they're not going to close Park Street. I'm a little upset tonight, and I'm sorry that I'm up here in this format, but I think that blocking something before I even got it started, meaning the parade application, and blocking off those 3 city blocks of businesses, changing something to make it more difficult for our community when it is extremely important to our community. We dealt with not going down Main Street, and I took the brunt of it. The city did not. I'm being told that I can't go down Main Street this year. I'm really frustrated. So I felt the need to come up and discuss this with you, my feelings tonight. And I will be turning in the application. I will be putting down the map, and I will again be showing you what tourism is to our community, how important this parade, the largest 4th of July parade, Mr. Cardus, in the entire state of Montana. And I was on the phone today with MDT and on the phone with the State Office of Tourism, who are very excited about our parade again this year, wondering again if we can grow it, and MDT having its concerns. So I'm concerned, we do not have the B Street issue this year. So, up Second down Main Street shouldn't be a problem. Last year, the parade route was smaller. We went from 74 entries. We had 74 entries. In the previous years, we've always been over 127 to 142 entries. So the parade route had a part in this. We cannot turn on Calendar Street. We had major issues last year with floats having to back up to turn. We had an injury of a horse float, and the list goes on. So the calendar turns are not conducive to the parade, and they need to go back up to Park Street. I appreciate you guys listening to my frustration. Again, haven't even turned it in yet, and it's already becoming an issue. So I'm hoping that we can move forward in a positive note, planning the parade this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Any other public comment? All right, next on our agenda, we have action item, or our consent items, sorry. Consent items A through D. Do I have a motion from the commission on consent items A through D? Or any that you'd like pulled for discussion?
I move we approve consent items A through D.
Second.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please. Yes?
Or.
Yes.
Motion passes. Tonight, we have no proclamations, and we have one scheduled public comment. We have the Active Transportation Coalition, the ATC, to present information regarding the Downtown Street Configuration Work Group. Come on up.
Hello.
Hi.
Stating my name. Okay, so I'm Colleen Ferris, and I administer the Active Transportation Coalition. I also live at 215 South I Street, if that's needed. Okay, so thank you all for your time. I really appreciate this opportunity to come address you all. I am here on behalf of the Active Transportation Coalition, and I'll abbreviate that to ATC throughout this briefing. And our mission is to promote active, safe, and connected communities to all residents and guests through thoughtful design and consideration of all modes of transportation. And we have been eager to participate in this working group since it was verbalized last year, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to address the commission and the staff on a proposal that we would like to bring forth to you all so that we can move forward in a positive and proactive way. And this would be a public process for how we can realize this group through collaboration, understanding, a facilitated and methodical public process, and data collection. And as a former scientist, that's my favorite part. So the ATC is offering to facilitate this process, and we believe that we are in a unique position to do so because we are already a working board with diverse members and other points that I'll refer to later. And this process that is on the screens now is a process that would, if we were to move forward, would be approved by the staff and commission. At each pivotal point, there'll be communication. So as such, there's consensus on the intent, the goals, timelines, the process, so that all parties can understand where we came from, so that when we reach our end goal, everybody's on board, even if it's not one way or the other. We've all been through this process together, and it's been clear. And so this kind of briefly, this process is broken down to 3 phases. One is development of design considerations, and I want to be clear that that's not what we are doing. We are not engineers. That has already been done, and a lot of those designs had already been presented at previous meetings. And what we want to do is go back and understand what is on the table. What can this working group consider and be discussed? So that way, when we get to the end, we're not giving the commission comments that are off topic, right? And so this initial discovery is understanding the roles and responsibilities, things like designating a facilitator that would not be in an advocacy role. Considerations, critical timelines. There's also the public meetings phase, so the public process phase. So this is scheduling, notifying, facilitating these public meetings. We absolutely have the capacity for this and have done so through various projects. And I can highlight the farmers market kind of public process if that's of interest as well. And then lastly, the report findings. And this is the goal of this public process, is to generate informed and respectful comments that then can come back to the commission and staff that can be considered. And the public knows that they've had a voice in this process. And so I guess a few why I believe that we are fit to facilitate. We're sanctioned by the city and the county. We have members of the county health department, planning, the planning departments, business members, nonprofits, and then of course the public, right, sometimes comes to the meetings as well. We're educated on various options, and we're confident that we can take whatever the commission and the staff says that we can discuss and be able to inform the public so that we're all on the same page. We have a paid staff member, so that's me. I have the capacity to be able to increase yours, right? I can plan to facilitate, which is a lot of work. We all know that, right? And that's hard going into a working group without a paid member. It aligns with our strategic plan to conduct outreach and education. We already do a lot of this work. We are documented partners with the city and various members of our community groups. I see that our value is we have the time to sit down with you all for the time that you all have, right? And then be able to take that and kind of cast a broader net so that we can get that public input that we've been requesting and then bring that forth in a consolidated manner. And these resources to compile the information, we've done it before, and I'm confident that we'd be able to use methodology that is approved by you all to do it again. I want to acknowledge the limitations of a facilitator role. So I acknowledge that whoever is facilitating, and that is someone who would be approved by the commission and staff if we were to move forward, is not in an advocacy role, right? We can understand that the roles and responsibilities for that person is different than the working members and the public that attends these meetings. Let's see. And the other, I guess, just to kind of wrap up, I'm not sure if I've definitely gone over 4 minutes and I wasn't clear about my timing, but just to kind of summarize, with this collaboration and increased public participation, I think the groups that have been requesting to be involved in this kind of working group, and then some, right? The people who don't know about what we're doing and don't know how to get involved, these are people that we can reach. And the goal would be to generate a lot of comments, right, that are informed, like I said, informed, respectful, because we all know that not every comment that comes forth is delivered in that manner. And so by taking this guided process, we hope that everyone will feel like their voice is heard and that it's fair, so that it is a smoother road ahead to public comment. And then this report back to the commission can look like a lot of different ways. So what I've provided is pretty bare bones, right? But it is the outline that then the commission and staff, if we were to choose to move forward, would then line these things out, right? And then that report would be like this summary, right? With kind of the appendix being the recordings of the meetings, the various methodology, et cetera. So that's the outline process, and what I would like to, what I would like the commission and staff to consider. And I really believe that we are in a position to help increase the capacity of the city staff and the commission through this process. And I want to thank you all for your consideration, and I can take questions if that's appropriate at this time, or I just look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Colleen. So if you have any clarifying questions, this is the time to ask. And then later on the agenda, we have the action item. Action item C is to discuss with the city manager some of the next steps and how we move forward. I can't remember how it reads, but to update us on the Downtown Street Configuration Committee and from the view of the city staff. So we could have more discussion at that time in relationship to also what Colleen's saying. But at this time, you can ask questions if there are any that you'd like clarified.
Later,
Warren?
would we be going over whatever topics would be covered in the report or in the study?
That's
Just a brief
that's a great
o-
question. And that is something that we would need to be looped in on, right? So I think at this point, I am not informed on what can be discussed. And that is one of the critical questions that we're asking during this discovery phase is, at this point in time, understanding the critical timeline, that is also something that would like to be defined further. What can be discussed? What elements? What what are we talking about?
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners?
I'd just like to say it's a step in the right direction. But including the ATC on this, just because I don't believe in duplicating boards, especially when they have the expertise already and stuff and the background and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to working on it as an action item with them.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Tonight we have no ordinances and no resolutions. Oops, and I flipped. Yes, we have one public hearing. We have resolution number 4841, amending the budget for fiscal year 2018 to 2019 by making net appropriation adjustments in the amount of 0. And this is our second reading. And I will open this public hearing. This public hearing is opened on resolution number 4841. Please come up if you would like to have comment. This public hearing is closed on resolution number 4841. Mr. Cardis, I usually ask you to present to people before, and I didn't. So is there anything that you'd like to add or summarize for us? And if public has any comments after, I should open it back up.
Sure. This is just a resolution that just cleans up some accounting items. It basically takes some funds that we used to account for things in and puts it back to where those costs are actually realized. So instead of putting retirement in a separate account, it goes onto the salaries where those where that retirement is actually spent. It just makes it easier to account for, and I think it gives a clearer picture to people what costs are associated with services versus these random accounts that are just retirement or health insurance or police pension. You can see exactly where those costs go for the services.
All right. Do we have any public comment after that update? Sorry. I flipped everything around. All right. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments on resolution number 4841? All right. Do we have a motion from the commission on resolution 4841?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 4841.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please. Yes?
4.
4.
Motion passes. Tonight, we have no ordinances and no resolutions. We have 4 action items. Our first action item is to discuss, approve, deny city manager's recommended impact fee advisory committee. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this committee is in relation to the impact fee study update that we are currently accomplishing. The new regulations require you to have an impact fee advisory committee. It's usually 3 members. You want at least one that's knowledgeable in financial, and then a couple that are knowledgeable in just development in general and items in the city. To make it easy for us, you'll notice there's only 2 applications. It's because I'm actually going to recommend you appoint our finance director for the finance portion of it. That'll keep it in check. The other 2 applicants are exceptionally qualified. They've been developers, insurance adjusters, mortgage lenders, engineers, and real estate agents. So it's a very great cross-section of skills to have in this advisory committee. They have 2 main roles. One will be to work with the firm as we develop our impact fee study. That's probably the more minor role. Later on, their role after the impact fee study is adopted and the new impact fees are implemented, they serve as kind of a appeals board. So if there's a developer that feels the impact fees are excessive or don't apply to them for some reason, they can bring their appeal to this board, who will make a recommendation on whether the city should reduce and or waive the impact fees for that specific development.
Thank you. We will open it to public comment and questions on our action item A for the Impact Fee Advisory Committee. Do we have any public comment? All right. Do we have any commissioner questions or comments at this time? Warren?
I have one question. One of the applications, after "are you a registered voter?" there's no response. Is that meaningful?
It is not. I happen to know they are a registered voter. I think they just missed that in the application.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was going to ask, so you mentioned that these folks would go on a board. How long will they be on that board, and what would be the process of replacing them? Or is that information to come later?
In this case, this board's a little different than most of them. This is just a standing board. It's like the police commission. They don't expire. So unless there's a reason to remove them or they ask to be removed, it just is a standing board until one of those 2 things happens.
And then it would just be an appointment to replace them?
Yes, it'd just be the same process. There'd be an application process, and then it would be brought to you for an appointment to replace that vacancy. This usually happens with committees or boards that don't meet regularly, that are very specific in their mission. So this board may not meet for 2 or 3 years if there's no appeals to the impact fee study, and then they would only be asked to participate again if we updated the study. So that's why they're different than some of the other boards where people are asked to serve continuously. So it falls more like the police commission, where once you're appointed, you just stay there until either there's a reason to remove you or you ask to be removed.
Any other questions? Other questions, commissioners?
I assume that there'll be a set of bylaws and stuff like that, or
There will be, most of that will come out during the impact fee study. we'll set up the rules for it.
Right.
But it'll follow our standard board procedures once we set it up.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason you don't see those yet, is we wanted to set up the standards before we get
Yeah, just so, we don't get in a pickle like board adjustments.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah.
I have a question. So there's 2 members, community members, and then finance director, and who else?
That's it. It's a 3-member board.
3-member board. Is there potential for additional board members?
I don't think there's a requirement for additional board members. So that would be the intent, would be just to keep it at 3.
But the requirement is 3?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? So do we have a motion on action item A?
Make a motion to approve action item A.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Maybe. Roll call, please. Yes,
Or
Yes.
motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have action item B to discuss, approve, deny, or approve draft resolution language for ambulance mill levy. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this resolution is not a city resolution. This will be a county resolution, so you're not required to pass it. It's just brought before you for information and to give you the opportunity to support this before it goes to the county for their approval. So this has been drafted with the county attorney and with county numbers, but it will go in front of their commission. I think they're scheduling it for either Thursday or next Tuesday. So either later this week or next week. So this is the resolution that they would be asked to vote upon. It's very similar to the resolution that went out as the package group for emergency services when we tried the mill levy the last time. This is specifically only ambulance. No other entities are involved in this particular mill levy. So this would be ambulance service only. It would be a county-wide mill levy, meaning it would apply to all citizens in the county, both inside of or outside of the limits of Livingston. The cost, the numbers in your packet are a little off. They updated some of the mill values for me on the new fiscal year. But for a $100,000 house, additionally, annually would be $11.98. For a $200,000 house, it would be $23.96 a year. And for a $250,000 house, which we consider pretty close to the average or mean, it's $29.95 a year. And it is for 10 years. So, and it would cover costs associated with salaries, but also for capital replacement of the ambulances and some of the monitors themselves.
Okay. We will open it to public comment. Do we have any public comment or questions on action item B?
Hi, Don Platek, 229 South Yellowstone. I'm just wondering if you could give me an idea of some of the terminology in there, specifically around aging vehicles. Is there a life expectancy for these emergency vehicles? Do we know what it is?
It depends a lot on how they're used. The 4x4 obviously has a shorter life cycle than the rest of them, just because of the nature of how it's used. The transport ones also have a shorter lifespan because we're sending them to Billings and back or Bozeman and back. So it's not so many years as miles, but on average, our ambulances have been lasting between 5 and 7 years. These particular ones, the 4x4 ambulance was out at one point. We currently have 4 ambulances. At one point during the snowstorm, we had 1 operational ambulance. So we're kind of getting to the end of the life cycle of all of them.
All right, so that was my next. Well, so first, are these about that 5 to 7 year range? And I don't know the mileage, but
Yeah, they are, and they're several 100,000 miles.
okay. So last year, can you give us an idea on how many days that they could not do provide reliable services?
Per ambulance, or
Just in general, are these things that, we really don't want to rely on because they were out of commission 10% of the days, whatever.
I couldn't give you a time, but I do know we went about, did we go 200% over our maintenance budget? Yeah, we were about 200% over our maintenance budget due to repairs on those particular ambulances. So they were out quite a bit, but more than that, they're starting to cost a lot to keep operational.
Okay. So this one now, I see it's a 10 mil. So with those numbers in mind, I'm just trying to get a feel on why it's a 10-year as opposed to a 5-year. It sounds like maybe 5-year would make more sense, but I don't know.
In this particular case, it's 10-year to cover all of those operational requirements. So this would cover a cycle of ambulances as well as a cycle of the monitors that go in the back of them. We have to replace about $200,000 worth of monitors that are no longer supported by the manufacturer. So we go with that. In this particular case, because it is a countywide, we'll look at recycling some of these vehicles to Clyde Park or Wilsaw or Gardner or whoever's interested in them. Because they don't put as many miles on them as we do, they're often still usable in some of the more rural areas. So since it is countywide, we will look see if we can get some benefits to the rest of the county as well.
All right, great, thanks. And the one with salary. So are the current salaries kind of commensurate with similar counties?
They are. We don't have a lot of similar counties. We're a little unique in that most cities don't provide ambulance service. You look at Bozeman, that's provided by AMR. It's commercial. Other communities, it's provided by the local hospitals. So we're one of the few combined fire and ambulance services in the state. Might be the only one. We're the only one? Yeah, the only full-time professional fire and ambulance service in the entire state. So the comps aren't easy to get, but yes, in general, we're, I'd say, in the middle of the market value. Obviously, it depends because you have to look at both paramedics and firefighters, where those are split out in other communities.
So any reason why Park County is different than the rest of the state?
I think it falls down to our Midland size. Smaller counties don't have professional ambulance services. They are all volunteer. Larger cities have either hospitals or private entities that would take it over. We're not big enough for a private entity to want to run because we don't have enough call volume to make it profitable. We're big enough that people don't want an all volunteer ambulance. So we kind of fall into that mid-range where we can't give it to anyone else to do, and we want it professional. So the city is really the only option left.
All right, great. Thank you very much. No tie. Looks good.
Thank you. Any other public comment on action item B? All right, any commissioner questions or comments?
I personally support it. That's all I have to say.
Which part of it?
The whole thing.
The whole thing, the language?
I mean,
Okay.
we're not voting on it. It's not
Yeah.
a voting thing, so
This is
I just wanna
informational.
Voice my support for
No.
the mill levy.
All right. Any other commissioner comments?
I have a question.
Melissa?
Can you, Michael, give us a recap if this mill levy does not pass countywide? What's to come for the folks in Livingston?
Well, we have pursued several other funding options for this. We looked at the gateway local option tax, looked at raising the population cap on the resort tax to be able to come up with some other alternate funding mechanisms. I know Representative Redfield introduced a bill that would provide $250,000 to counties out of the bed tax. It's unlikely any of those will pass, so we're not left with any other options. We would, at that point, the county, so this is a city service jointly funded with the county. Both entities would have to look and say, we could do a city-only mill levy, but that's probably not going to cover county residents. So that would mean either a shrinking service area for the county, or the county would have to pay for that service out of different funds. So they'd have to take it out of PILT money, or they'd have to take it out of their general fund, or they'd have to take it out of somewhere else. So they would have to come up with a different funding model. If they couldn't do that, or they weren't willing to do that, then we're probably talking about coverage area shrinkage. There's a lot of, it's questionable how much that could really save, just because we still need the full staff on all the time. So it may be a point where the entire ambulance service isn't economically feasible to support. It just depends on where the county comes in and how costs continue to go. We could do, for a while, we could operate and just not replace anything. But that's not a long-term solution. That's just a short-term solution and hope that we came up with another funding source in the meantime. But I think long-term, it would be either reduced or eliminated ambulance service or returning to volunteer.
Any other questions, Melissa?
Thank you.
Commissioners, any last thoughts?
If I need an ambulance, I would prefer one that works and is not in need of repair. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way.
And that has a paramedic on board.
Yeah, that almost all paramedic,
Yeah.
right? Except for 2, something like that. Agreed.
Would we lose any staff? I should have asked that. Would there be any staff lost if these things don't pass? That's one thing on my mind.
Actually.
Eventually, yes, because you would, if we were to get to the point where we would be forced to eliminate ambulance service, you would restructure the way the fire worked because you don't, I would say 80 to 90% of our call outs are ambulance. Is that pretty close? Yeah. So 80% of our call outs are ambulance. Crews wouldn't be getting called out nearly as much if we were only doing fire. You could go to different shift rotations, and you would go to different shift rotations to save some money so that we're not, there's no reason to keep them on 24-hour shifts if they're not getting called out as much. So yeah, and that would be a long-term issue that you'd have to, negotiate with the union, and there'd be a lot to go with it. It would be a big change.
Thank you.
Okay. Since we don't have to make a decision, we'll just move on to action item C, discuss, approve, deny city manager's update. Or this is not really a vote necessarily, but city manager's update on downtown street configuration committees. So Mr. Cardus, would you give us just a synopsis of what you have worked on or have ideas for this at this time?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as far as the ATC, I'll just go ahead and jump in with that. The ATC presentation today, I think that would fit well with the model we're looking at. We're really looking at a working group that would be, it would be created and staffed under the city manager. So it wouldn't necessarily rise to the level of the city commission. So we wouldn't have to go through a lot of the administrative work to make that happen, but we could create a working group that way. I would envision it having about 7 members. I think you get much over 7 and it starts to get a little unwieldy. So part of what we've been working on is trying to figure out what the composition of that 7-member board would look like, the working group. An ATC member was listed, an LBID member, so Livingston Business Improvement District member, because they would be very representative of downtown, a chamber member, a URMA member, a Historic Preservation Society member, and 2 citizens at large. So that would hit, I think, the main stakeholders for the downtown street configuration.
Can you say those again?
Sure, it'd be ATC, the LBID, the chamber, the URA, the Historic Preservation Society, and then just 2 citizens at large.
With the URA member, you mean one of the board members off the URA now?
Yes.
But don't we struggle with having enough of them currently?
We don't have a full contingent of URA members, but I would guess that one of them would like to be involved in that because a lot of it may end up being URA money, depending on if it's inside the TIF district. So I think they would be important to have involved in those initial discussions as we look at, because TIF funding will be one of the mechanisms we could use for these kind of projects. So I think it'd be important to have them early. It wouldn't have to be an additional member. It could be somebody that's already serving on the URA. They would just attend these working sessions as well. That would give you your 7 members. I think it would cover the major stakeholders and what downtown would look like. You might notice I don't actually have a staff member on there, a city staff member. So this would be completely led by citizen-led or interest group-led. We'd follow all the procedures so they'd still be public meetings, especially the stuff Colleen was talking about, being able to notice it, being able to facilitate it. And if the ATC wanted to facilitate it and have a separate person be a member, I think that might be appropriate so they could have an advocate, because I think it's important they also have an advocate. But if they also like to facilitate it, that might work really well. Or we could make that a position on the board, like secretary of the committee, that would then be in charge of facilitating and administering the committee work, as in noticing and scheduling and making sure the public involvement. So that is kind of the format we were looking at. Colleen brought up a great point of what can this committee look like at, and it's probably going to be non-construction things, right? Like what can we change without actual asphalt and concrete, whether that's striping, whether that's traffic direction, whether that's the changing of parking, whether that's identifying new parking areas that could be included. So I doubt it will be actual construction projects, but it might be suggestions for future construction projects. Just depends on how we define that. And I think the intent would be to get the group first and then to kind of work through that and see what the commission's intent is, what the group would like to work on, and see if we can find the common ground between all of the participants. So that would give you the scope of what they were doing. It would give you who's doing it. And then I think the reporting out is exactly what we're looking for. And, I could meet with them after each meeting for just an ongoing status report of how things are headed. If there's any information they need, we can make staff available to get information before the next meeting. Those kind of, like if there's questions on actual traffic control devices or turn radiuses or the specific engineering pieces, we could provide technical information as needed. But I think that would help. Hopefully it would help give that feel that it's citizen led and citizen driven, because really the configuration downtown isn't a city staff issue unless it causes a problem with compliance with codes, compliance with the universal traffic control device guidance, or causes a problem for law enforcement or fire. So we'd be more advisory, and so it'd be kind of a citizens committee that would be overseen by staff to make sure we have the technical aspects correct, and then all of that could be bundled together and brought to the commission for either further guidance on where to go with it or approval and implementation.
Thank you. I think we'll open it to public comment and questions if we could start there. I know there's been a lot of people interested in this, so I'm hoping in the next month we hear a lot more.
Good evening, Federico Malatesta, 15 Buffalo Jump Road. So first of all, good idea about the ambulance. Hope it passes. It's glad to hear that. I think the committee, that is what we discussed last year about the transportation, is a good idea. I have one question and one suggestion. The question is, I'm not sure why we had seen there was an updated traffic study that went back to the one-way street. Everything is a nail to a hammer. And we had very good discussion why it was a bad idea and why the community didn't like it. Not sure why we needed an updated from the same people who proposed it in the same place without having the wider discussion. So I hope that we don't proceed on parallel route. On one side, Marvin and Associates traffic study, and on the other, the committee, because whatever we end up in traffic has to be a result of the committee, not of a consultant. And maybe this clarification that I just saw today, the transportation update. Now, the suggestion is the traffic and parking study, as a lot is about parking, to many of us is actually part of the growth policy. Depending on how the city grows, it will require different traffic and different parking plan. So as we're about to start and develop the growth policy, why don't we link it? Why do we, part of the other growth planning always include traffic and parking, etc. So why don't we make this at least to have a very, very strong interaction between the consultants who are doing the growth policy and this group? I think the idea of facilitator is excellent, but why not do it in the same context? It's part of the same things. Dangerous by having 2 or 3 parallel processes we end up with different people talking about different things in different contexts, and we end up with 3 different ideas, and I'm not sure there's a lot of value in that. So, that's
Good
all.
point. Very good point. Thank you. I think I would like to answer that, just in my opinion, Federico, that I see this group as being very valuable to the growth policy. And I agree with you that when we're developing the growth policy, their feedback can be, I mean, one of the most valuable things for our downtown in general. So I agree. Any other public comment? Okay, I have a couple questions, and then if we do have anything that comes up, please, we'll open it up to public comment if you have any more questions after the commission speaks on it. I am a little worried just about filling the slots, you know, with the different entities. Do we have a backup plan, I guess, if, I mean, because some of our committees are short on numbers in general, or they struggle to meet regularly, or, you know, with a quorum sometimes, or in various situations. You know, if the Historical Preservation Board doesn't have a member that wants to participate in this, this committee or this work group, then what? What do we do to fill that? Just open it to more citizens, have another citizen on, or do we have a business owner at large or second? You know, what do you think?
As far as the filling of it goes, if there's one organization that doesn't wish to participate, I think you could easily just fill that with another citizen at large. If there's 2 that don't want to participate, I would just cut the committee down to 5 instead of 7. I think that might be an easier way to do it, because the citizens at large represent the community at large, but these will still be public processes. So anybody else that wants to just come attend and not be a part of the commission still could. So it's not like if you're not a citizen at large on the panel, you don't get a say. It's just that they were the ones that will actually be in the formal process the whole way through. So I think you could do either. You could, if there's just one missing, I would say, hey, just replace it with a citizen at large. If there's 2 that aren't interested, then I would just cut the committee size down to 5.
Thanks. I'm glad you have a plan. Any other questions, commissioners?
I guess one thought that's on my mind is the last time we met was for that working group, that working meeting we had. And we talked about the number of boards we have. And we even talked about the potential of wrapping like the Comron's suggestion of the Conservation Board in with Parks and Trails, which to me seems probably like 2 more different ideas than even the ATC with this downtown working group. So I'm wondering, I'm just trying to get my head around why it would make sense to create a new group if we already have a group that's a good representation of the population and people show up to those meetings. That's sort of where my head is going.
Are you asking us to brainstorm with you that answer?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I guess so. That's for the commissioners, I suppose, in a sense. I don't see how this is an advantage to create another group in some sense. I mean, the makeup of it hypothetically is great, but we also have, it sounds like from what Colleen presented, it's not like there's not downtown business owners or business owners represented in the ATC, unless I misunderstood what she said. It sounds like there's still representation.
Colleen, what's the makeup of could you come up and answer that? So what's the makeup of the ATC?
So, makeup of the group consistently is myself, and then I represent both PCAC and then I guess PCAC and ATC. Mike Inman, county planner. Lawson Moore is also a planner. I actually don't know his official title. County commissioner and public person, Steve Codwell. Bryce Jones, Catabatic owner, and he's also the liaison to the Livingston Bike Club. And then we have Jean Marie
Sauvigny.
Sauvigny, thank
Sauvigny.
you. Who does not come in person, but I email every month and then talk with on the phone because we historically have planned on each other's days. So if we miss a day, we go the week after. If they want to do something special, they put it on ours. We have since coordinated schedules and we moved our date so that we can have a liaison to both working groups or boards. So whether it's Jean or someone, they're going to be picking a liaison. And then there are other people on the email list that we communicate back and forth. I also forgot Emily Wood, who is the health department coordinator and educator, I believe her title is. So Emily is part of that group that attends every week. And then from week to week, sometimes members of the public come when they're interested. For example, when we were working on the flag project, we had members of coordinating with the various groups, including Mr. Isley.
And Jean Marie is the chair of the Parks and Trails.
Yes, she is.
Just an FYI, everyone.
And then Sarah Strands is a Livingston resident who is newer to town. I guess she grew up here, but has come back after 20 some years and has been, attending meetings and also the Livingston Bike Club. Anyways, there's a lot of communication between these different groups, and Sarah and I email a lot on after minutes go out for what she's interested in and how to collaborate.
Thank you. That is a very helpful description of the group. So does anyone have comment for Melissa's question on?
Why? I think I brought that up the last time. Why not? Why create another group if we already have a board? You know, maybe. But I want to make sure that it's an open process, that if somebody's interested in it, being part of that group, that they would be allowed to apply to the ATC. That's my only hang up, just being transparent, I guess, and making it fair and open. But yeah, I have no qualms about the ATC heading things up at all. So I've worked with them before, and so there. But I also like the way Mike has got it structured too. So it's kind of like, okay, we'll see who's available and who wants to do it. You know.
Any other comments, Warren or Mel?
Well, I think one of the pluses about the way it's structured is that even people is getting public feedback, just the same way as the county growth policy. Everybody can't be on a committee or make meetings, but there was enough public input from different meetings around the county, and I think that it's in the plan. And I think that's a very valuable part of it, regardless of who is actually on the committee or work group,
Right,
whatever. Yeah.
Yes, please.
So just to tell you why I did it this way instead of just saying ATC, do it, a couple reasons. If we want it to be a city group, right? Like we'd have to either deputize all of the ATC as a city board, or we have to create something different, right? Because ATC is not a city board. So if we're going to follow all the because we want to ensure we follow all of the open meeting laws by making it an official city board, we could do that by either making ATC a city board or a separate board with a different name so that we don't usurp them as ATC. It gets a little ugly when you're trying to make them an actual city board. If you just want to farm it out and just give up city control over it, then that's an option. And I think, and the reason these particular organizations, so it's besides the two citizens at large, it's an organization of organizations to try and get the widest possible representation, right? From different groups. And these 5 groups were all, I think, heavily interested in the last go of city street configurations, and I think they would be heavily interested in this go of city street configurations. So I think it's easy. So if you between the ATC, the LBID, the Chamber, the URA, and the Historic Preservation Society, you're getting pretty much all the business owners in town. Some represented in 2 different ways, whether they're downtown business owners or whether they're citywide business owners. You have the Historic Preservation Society, and I know Jack will be super interested in this because he's super interested in making sure the downtown keeps that historical feel to it. You get, the ATC perspective on it, which is about active transportation, which may be different than a business owner's goal in expanding parking, right? Actually, sometimes those are actually conflicting priorities. You can either leave room for additional active transportation or you can create additional parking. And I think some business owners would have a different perspective on that than the active transportation would.
Yeah.
And so I think this would it's more representative of a greater variety of viewpoints in what the purpose of the downtown is. And the more people you can get involved in the earlier stages, I think the less conflict you'll have at the later stages when you actually go to implement something. So that's why all of those organizations were included when we looked at it.
So were you suggesting that like the LBID, Chamber, URA, and Historic Preservation Committees all have different members?
Some
Because
of
I
them-
would think that there would be a lot of overlap between those 4, but maybe I'm wrong.
There is some overlap, but the chamber is obviously much larger than just the LBID. And so the chamber's priority may be different than the LBID's. The downtown business owners are a subset that might have a very specific viewpoint where citywide businesses might have a different viewpoint. And the chamber represents all those businesses, so it kind of brings it in a little differently. And there is a lot of overlap in those two. The Historic Preservation Society, I'm not sure how many business owners are actually members of the Historic Preservation Society. Any? No. So there's no business owners in the Historic Preservation Society. So there's no overlap there. There might be a little bit of overlap between the URA and the Historic Preservation Society, but I think Bob's on both, right? Yeah. So there's some overlap there. But there's not as much overlap as you would expect, because the chamber membership is exceptionally large, and it's much greater than just what's downtown. So I think it brings a little different perspective, and hopefully there's some overlap. And I think the overlap is good because you're going to get both of those perspectives. And I do think, depending on the one thing that's not addressed in here is how do we decide who chairs the committee? And that would be one of the issues that we'd have to look at and say, hey, how do we look at that and how do we decide who chairs it? But, and that maybe we'll leave it up to the group to vote their chair in. There's a lot of different ways to do that. But yeah, I do think it gives you a broader set of viewpoints. And I think will hopefully prevent conflict further down the road from people saying, hey, we weren't represented in that committee.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to agree too that I think we need to let them vote their chair in through the process, like in a normal committee or group. Does that answer enough of what you're thinking or wanting to ask about, Melissa?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean, I hear everybody's input and I appreciate it. I'm just not sure that I see it as being as diverse as it's being presented, but maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe it's, And I think it's maybe one thing that's hard about it is we don't know exactly what the topics are, right, that are going to be discussed. And so how do we know that, that's still a really big question mark that was brought up. And so I think that's,
Well, and I think that's part of our role is we get to help guide. What is it we want to be considered as the voice of the community or of the people coming to us? So we can help that, but they're also going to bring a lot of ideas to us, you know. I'm sort of on the fence on the issue that I definitely want the ATC because of the depth of knowledge involved in this. I can't imagine us not utilizing the group to help facilitate in particular. I would love to see that. And as far as membership or being a member of it, I know from going through this process, and we as commissioners went through the process of discussing some of the downtown street issues. The one thing I took from it, and the reason I think I've been such an advocate for this working group, is that people want the people from downtown, either the users of the streets to the owners of the businesses on the streets, want a say in this. And that was something that we heard very loud and clear as a commission when we were going through the process and decision making. So to, exclude some of these members, maybe, we don't know yet. I feel like we don't know until we ask the community in general, what do you think of this? As well as the people that we're asking or the groups that we're going to ask. We don't know until we hear from them. So I feel like this is more of a time to start getting it out there, and then we can think, next meeting, let's finalize the layout of this after we hear from the community what people really want. A member of the chamber, there's something like 50 people, that are members. That's could be a wide ranging person or, just that individual. I don't know how many people are on each of these boards just off the top of my head, but I think we have a lot of knowledge from them as well that I think is important for us to consider. So I'm sort of seeing that I can't imagine the ATC not being involved, especially I love Colleen's idea and presentation of her ability to help facilitate this process. I would really greatly appreciate it. And then thinking ahead to what we want to do and what the group makeup could look like. I think by putting it on next meeting's agenda is what I'm looking at to finalize it and do our checking in to these different organizations to see their thoughts. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that makes sense. I also, the other thing that stands out to me is the idea of the city having to, what was the language you used? Sanction the ATC and make them comply to city board rules. But this is a question for Colleen probably, but the Active Transportation Coalition doesn't just do things within the city of Livingston, right? Don't you all do stuff countywide? So, I mean, that would be like a huge drawback. Constraining them to the city, would be a huge drawback of making it ATC only. But I would welcome if she has any comments on that topic, because that was something, I don't know if that was something that the board considered, your group considered. Yeah, because that would be a shame since they do so much good work.
Yes. But I know from our letters we received, people are very passionate about the downtown and the configuration and the parking and the issues that I want to make sure we're addressing all and listening to all parts and pieces of this. So what do you guys think? Let's make a, actually, I said I was going to open it up. Do we have any other public comment from now that we have discussed kind of commission's view on this or where we may go?
Okay, so Colleen Ferris, 215 South I Street. I guess I just want to say is what Mr. Cardos and what I am presenting are two very different things. And that is the choice that you all are deciding and working through, right? I think personally, one more board is really hard, right? To attend or to be a part of one more thing for a lot of people can be really difficult, right? To maintain that schedule and balance. And I think that the main difference that I'm seeing between Mr. Curtis's plan and facilitating a public process is not, I guess, not paring down the options first before it goes to public comment. Right. I think from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that this 7-member group or 5 would learn the technical in and outs and discuss them and then pare it down before it went to public comment. And I believe that, you know, the chamber has over 400, I believe, she was saying, members. And I would venture to say that not every one of them would agree with their representative. Which is why I think that understanding those technical in and outs from a point of contact and then disseminating that information out to a larger group, you could get all 400 members to those meetings, right? And I think that process could be set up so that it wasn't just during the mornings where parents who have off can attend. And it's not going to be just at night when working young people are working their jobs. I also see the limitations of that 7-member group. And I don't see a young person reflected in that. I think a student, right, when we think about the young people who are navigating these streets and what they want to see in their community, because they're growing up here, I think their voice needs to be heard. And I think having them included, it's a lot more work, right, to start with a broader base. But I see that as a positive because they're included in that discussion. And I just wanted to clarify that if the ATC were to facilitate this process, what we are offering is just to facilitate this process. And I guess I didn't understand that we would have to be sanctioned. I thought that we as a partner in this community could facilitate this group and still have the flexibility of operating under what we decided it would be. I had one other thought. I know I have 55 seconds. Let's see if it comes to me. So the ATC facilitating, we don't have an agenda in that. We are not taking what is possible and then figuring out what we want to present. I think we are just offering that we can be the messenger of the information that is out there to the public and then back to the commission. And I think that's different from a working group of 7 members taking the information, parsing it down, and then presenting that to the public, where I think voices will be lost by inserting that second step that would inherently boil things down from these 7-member groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Sorry.
Leslie Feigl, 303 East Park Street, Livingston Chamber. Mr. Cardos's comments on the way that the board would be created, I'm in for, all for. I think that having that wide range, I've sat through the meetings that we did have here in front of the city commission, and there was such a diverse group when this finally came to a point where we all really wanted to have a say. I appreciate you bringing up the chamber, because our business range, there's a lot of voices out there that represent the whole community, and she's right. It some of the people are for, some of the people against, but that's a way that I could reach out into our membership and our businesses and then bring that forward to the group to kind of pare it down, versus it being, kind of, wide ranged. Also, I have other voices that the chamber would bring forward, and that is desires from the State Office of Tourism and the office of the film office from the governor's office, and outdoor recreation, the expansion of the bicycling marketing plan that's coming out this year with the Office of Tourism. So there's a whole nother range that would come in from the CVB portion. I'm sorry, Convention and Visitors Bureau. So which is a lot of dollars in this community. So I agree with Mike's and I with his plan, and I hope that you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Federico Malatesta, 15 Buffalo Jump Road. I like the composition that Mike has been talking about. I think a very good representation. Exactly what Leslie was saying, and understand also the comments Colleen was making. I think from your point of view, what I will be looking at is what do you do with 100 or 1,000 very different comments on a variety of issues? How can you take that and make a policy? Just impossible for your body, right? So, and I don't want to go back to the same point, but as the growth policy in simple terms is about traffic, it's about parking, it's about infrastructure development, economic health of the community, and cultural development. It's a few other things. It's not that many. Now, imagine if you have to replicate the same process to get public comments on each of this area. You're going to get 10,000 different comments, completely conflicting, without the option of evaluating what would it mean, because in the end, we'll have to make incremental decision. We'll have either A, B, or C, and they will have opportunity costs, and they will have different plus and minuses. So in your place, you will need to find a process that helps you evaluate a number of finite options when it comes to development. And you'll have to find a body that takes all of these comments and makes them meaningful, right? Because somebody says, I don't want a parking lot there, or somebody said, I don't want business development in that corner. How can you make decision with this information? Just impossible. So some of the issues that we're talking tonight about transportation, you will find on any aspect of the growth policy. And you might want to consider having a steering committee for the growth policy that then takes into account public comments, feed them in 2 or 3, 4 different buckets, and then make practical proposals. Because you made a very important point, is how much passion there was on the one-way street. Imagine for all of the other items that are going to come out from the growth policy. So while it's important to have a body that takes this comment without pre-feeding information, you also need to have a process to take all those comments, make meaningful policy. Otherwise, your job is just going to be impossible. You're just going to get, hundreds of pages on what do we do next. And the consultant cannot do that work. Consultant will only do a very narrow job of suggesting different solutions that will have to take into account what a steering group does. And unless you duplicate as a steering group, which is a lot more work, I don't see how that is practically feasible. So I know the commission composition is good, but then you'll have to find 5 or 6 different commissions for all the other issues. And how do you get a public comment? So I think that is a big dilemma at this point, from a practical point of view going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Federico. right. Any other public comment?
Mike Inman, 1120 East Clark Street, member of the Active Transportation Coalition. From what I'm hearing, I think there's two very, like Colleen mentioned, two very different processes. What Mr. Cardus is presenting, a working group, that was not what the ATC was considering. Even with our broad membership, it wouldn't be something that we would sit down and kind of work through the various design considerations. Ours would very specifically work with the city administration, knowing that they're in a position to be able to tell us what those options, those design considerations would be, and that we would gather that information, and then we would disseminate that to the public. The public meetings, we would try to encourage as many people to come, provide feedback and comments, which we would then distill down into a report to provide back to you. So it wouldn't matter necessarily how many people showed up. The more the merrier, just to be able to provide feedback and education on those design considerations. So we wouldn't be providing a recommendation. It would just be that feedback, similar to kind of like a growth policy. The working group, if you went that way, we'd be happy to participate, but that would be formalizing representation on a working group. They would take that information. They would work within that group to come up with a recommendation to the city commission. Whether or not the public would be involved in that or how they would be involved in that, that would be up for the city commission to determine, but two pretty drastically different processes. So we could participate in either one. But if you do go with the ATC, we're not going to have a working group where we would sit down and work through those design considerations. We'd expect the city administration to lead on that charge and give us basically, this is what you can consider, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. I'm closing public comment, and any other comments from the commission? Questions?
I'm confused. Seems we need a roadmap here of where something starts, how it starts, who's involved, who's going to run the growth plan. I mean, you got a million questions. And everybody through some mechanism will have their voice heard, but I'm trying to formulate this in my mind. It seems like, we're right now it's really confusing. So how do we make it real? Who's going to run it? What do we have to do? A lot of questions. But it's I was in when I first started a economic growth policy that was run by the city. It was an open house, and there wasn't a roadmap for the meeting, and it was disastrous. Because everybody, you just lost control. All these ideas were flying around, and so this is what hit my mind right now. You got all these groups, and how is it going to make some sense out of it? So it's early in the ball game, and I think now's a good time to start making a definition, or the how-to part and the who part. So everybody's voice is heard somehow.
All right, thanks. Commissioners, anything else?
And Mike knows way more about this than I do. The county growth policy was guided by a firm, and they had specific questions on large sheets of paper tacked up on the wall, and they actually quantified the answers. Yes, no, whatever the response was, so that at the end of the public response, they had actual numbers for responses, and they also had actual questions. Now, if I'm understanding correctly, the the disparity here is who's running the show. Is it with the ATC versus the city, if I'm understanding it correctly. And if I'm not, please correct me. What do you see again? I don't totally comprehend it. What do you see about the difference between your approach or view and Mr. Cardos's view?
Actually, do you mind if I take a shot at that, Colleen? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the general question, the crux of the issue that we're talking about is what kind of outcome are we looking for? Are we looking for just a compilation of public input that gives us, hey, these are all the people that have provided us input. It's broken down into this type of input. The city tells ATC, hey, these are the kind of things you can look at. They kind of put that information out there. They get feedback from the public. That feedback is feedback. It's a report, but it's not a recommendation. It's not a filtering of anything. So it's just kind of a gathering and a disseminating and congealing and putting it into a format that you can read. It doesn't come prepackaged with a recommendation or a consensus. It's just information that's out there. What I'm proposing is a much more formal process. That could be included in the process by a working group, but the working group, the intent would be to have enough representation in it to actually be able to provide a recommendation at the end to say, hey, here's all the public input. And we would still try and get public input. And we could even make this a double layered approach where we have ATC do the public process to get as much public information as possible and provide that to a working group, which could then disseminate it, go through the ideas, do some of the technical aspects of it, and actually provide a recommendation that I'll say is pre-deconflicted. You have these groups working together before it ever comes to you, instead of it coming to you and then the groups coming in and presenting their aspects of it. So it is a very different process, and it's not really about who's in charge of it. It's about what your end goal is. ATC is talking more about a process, a public information process of both providing information to the public and then gathering their feedback on that information, but not going through and validating it or guiding it in any way. Just really getting out there in the public and seeing what they want based on some of the information the city would give them on what the options are. The working group is much more of a way for, I would say, the leading organizations in the city to get together and kind of go through some of that public input and say, hey, this is the common ground between the organizations that we think we could get to. So it's really about information versus recommendation. Is it something that's a formal process? And the reason the working group would have to be a formal process that would follow all the rules is it is providing a recommendation to the commission. So it has to be a city function that follows all the city rules for being publicly noticed, having minutes, that whole bit about being, because it's an official function then. It's providing you a recommendation. It's an advisory committee. Gathering citizen feedback is not an official function. And if they were just going to do a public process like that, where there's no recommendation that comes out of it, it's just an attempt to get information that's one point of information in your considerations, that doesn't need to follow all the formal city processes, because everybody will get that report at the end, which is the output of that commission. And it doesn't matter that they don't have to be involved in the deliberations of it. It's just a report, and you can take it or leave it for what it's worth among all the other pieces of information that you would get as you're trying to make actual policy decisions. Does that make a little more sense? Did I get that right, Colleen?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So any other questions or comments to Michael on that?
I think you said something that helps me clarify my own thinking about the Active Transportation Coalition. The thing that I think would be a big mistake for us to lose would be the skills that they bring to the table when it comes to collecting and public comment. I think that the Active Transportation, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do that really well. And that's what we really need to make any decisions, is the most public comment that we can get. So if this hypothetical that you proposed is possible, I think that could be an interesting collaboration of having the Active Transportation Coalition work to get us lots of information before it comes to us as a recommendation. Does that make sense, what I said? So Michael said something about Active Transportation is gathering the data and they're going to make a report. And instead of the report going to us, it goes to this working group. Because the Active Transportation is not, they're just collecting data. They're not like saying yes, no, or maybe to any of the ideas. But then when it goes to the working group, Active Transportation could then say yes, no, or maybe before it comes as a recommendation to the commission. But then they would be one of 7. Does that make sense? So I think if that hypothetical is a possibility, I feel like that could be a good solution for the city. That's just my personal.
That's what I said earlier, pretty much in that same way.
Maybe I needed to hear it in a different, I'm sorry, Darrell.
No, that's okay. But I agree with you. That's exactly what I said in just a different way.
Maybe I needed to hear it more than once.
Yeah, it's all right. It's okay. I don't mind. I think I want to go back to my initial thought is that I do think we need more public feedback on how they see this group before we make the decision. But I'm all about finding balance in our ideas and in our community, because I think if you find kind of middle ground, it tends to represent more people. And I think this is a prime example of that. We can find middle ground by really utilizing the important group of the ATC, which I can't imagine, like I said, and you said, Melissa, that losing that level of knowledge and expertise would be a big loss for us, and I think a big loss for the group. But finding or giving people time to give us more feedback on this, have it on the agenda for the next meeting, and then we can kind of hone in on I don't think we have to have it highly detailed. I think it's the group that needs to start to brainstorm what they see their role as well, working with us and the city. But that's how I look at it.
Madam Chair, we're going to have to select somebody to run the growth policy, are we not, at some point? And are we not going to get information for the people that run growth policies as what they want coming at them? So, I mean, that's, to me, that's the first step is to kind of get that resolved. And from there, a game plan evolves out of that. And then we're really going in the right direction. It's the same thing. We opened up a topic about one-way street downtown. Whew. That's some pretty pointed things not to do and things to do. And but that's the start of the process. But we need somebody who's a growth. I mean, it's actually people run these things, and they certainly could write a little, a plan for us of what they want to do, what we can do, what the public, where everything sits. So I think until that happens, we're kind of spinning our wheels. So that's the critical part.
Thank you, Mel. Okay. Any other commissioner comments? So what do we want to do to move forward?
What you suggested previously, I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm with that.
So giving public more time on how they see this group make up to be, then putting it on the next agenda as an action item for a vote as to a final vote on the makeup of the committee or the working group. And could you, Michael, have that, like those options laid out for us as well and for the community, just from what we gave us feedback today, which I think there's 3 scenarios. One that is in between, which Melissa and I both recommended. There's one that is more just laid out in just the initial list. And then there's the other of the ATC, more public comment gathering side. So if we could have all the parts put together just for us and on the agenda, that'd be great. Or when you present for the agenda item. You okay with that?
Absolutely. It doesn't even sound hard.
All right. So we don't have a decision to make other than putting that on the agenda. Do we need to make a motion, I guess, to put it on the agenda? The action
I
item?
can just put it on the agenda.
Okay. Sometimes we do. Moving on to action item D, discuss, approve, deny final draft of the City of Livingston Organizational Strategic Plan. Mr. Cardews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the copy you just got incorporated all the changes that you had requested in the working session. I don't think there was anything specifically. The only thing I changed was, and hopefully this is more what you were looking for, on page 22, if you go to the very last page. We struggled with that, I think, throughout the trying to figure out exactly what the wording should be. And so I came up with the final one, topics to consider for strategic plan updates. So it basically just things that we are considering to add as we update the plan. So that doesn't constrain us to a time frame. So it just says whenever we update it, these are the things we can do. That also, I will kind of consider that section similar to the status updates. If there's a topic that comes up that becomes important to the community, I'll just add it to this page because it's not a policy. It's just things that we will look at when we go to update it. And it'll just be a nice place to park things so that when we go to update, we can see what other things we might consider. But other than that, it's just the changes you asked for. I think everything is in there. I don't think we added any additional status changes this time. It wasn't that far in between. So unless there's questions, that is it.
All right. So to the public, we have gone through this process for some time, starting it back in January of last year. And it was our first strategic plan. So it took us a little longer. Our last meeting was on Thursday, where we had public input for the final draft. And we also, as a commission, considered some changes to some wording, whether to keep items in or take them off. And this is our final plan that we finished with on Thursday. So do we have any public comment on action item D? All right, commissioners, do you have any comments or questions on? We've spent a lot of time on it. I think that we have to, or we all feel, yeah, we all feel like we know what, how we feel about it. So I think we're close to a decision, I guess.
I just would like to say I think it's a great step forward. Finally moving somewhere with something. in a positive direction.
One of my favorite things about this plan is that it just puts into words all of what we as a commission, I know for 5 years have talked about a lot of these issues, and now it's here in front of us as I think a motivating factor to how we grow in our community and the issues that are important to us. So, or I mean, as far as city issues that we can actually work on, that's another thing, because this is a work plan for the city versus just community strategic plan, which is a bigger picture. So I think this is a great start. Any other last comments? All right, do we have a motion from the commission on action item D?
Motion to approve action item D.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Newts and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please. Yes?
4.
4.
4.
4.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You made the mistake of keeping this well under 2 hours, so now I can talk for a long time. We'll start with the mundane and move to the exciting. The first public hearings on variance requests should come before you in the first meeting in April. So before that, we probably want to set up a little working session to do variance training, just to go over what's a variance request, what are the requirements to approve them, how do they come, what's the new process. So if there is a time before April 2nd that you would like to set that up, let me know. Was March 19th the first one? Wrong thing. March 19th is the first one. So we've got 2 weeks.
Do you mean like little mini lessons to individual commissioners, or do we need to do a working?
We can do it any way you want. You can come in individually. We can do a work session between now and the 19th. I am here for you.
How much time are you thinking when you say mini lesson?
It's probably 20 to 30 minutes, depending if you have any questions.
I say come in on our own.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And we'll provide paperwork for you as you review the variances with the information on it. I think it'll be pretty straightforward. Doesn't make the decisions easy, but at least it's clear what the job is.
Our first one, is that regarding 220 South M?
Yes, it is.
Martha O'Rourke.
Yes, I think that's the first one.
I had an email from her and I need to respond back. Okay.
And there obviously, because there was a backup, there's a queue of them. Are we just doing one on the 19th? So I was wrong. There's only 4, not 5.
So I'm going to ask then, since you're talking, Jim, so what about the people, so the ones that were before the variance change in the ordinance? The 4 pending will come to us?
Yep.
I thought they were grandfathered in and the decision was going to be made.
They're grandfathered in as far as the fee goes, but since there is no Board of Adjustments, you are the only board that can
Okay.
make the decisions.
All right. So
Only power.
say those dates again. I just have had a lot of questions about when this is going to happen. Okay. I thought there was 5.
There's only 4.
Okay.
I was off by 1.
Okay. All right, thanks. So you will contact the city manager to meet? Okay.
So all of you just get a hold of me whenever you're ready and we'll set that up.
And some of us could double up, you know.
Not triple.
not
That's right.
triple.
2 of you at once if you'd like, but not 3. We had our first impact fee update meeting today with the contractor. That went very well. They're obviously very knowledgeable on the process. So we'll be starting that, which is why we have had to appoint the committee this evening. So that's set up and going. do you want training from the consultant on impact fees or just education on how they work, what they're looking at? Because he offered that as one of the things they could do is come train the commission on impact fees. And
At a commission meeting?
did he say, Jim? I don't think he does either. We could do it any way you wanted. We could set up a work session, which might be easier because then it's less formal. Or we could do it as public comment at a commission meeting if you wanted it more. Yeah.
How long does that take?
It can be as in-depth as you want there, because there might be a lot of questions on impact fees and how they work.
I agree because,
Easily accessible to the public.
well, we could have it as an action item for questions too, then if we have, or have him do the presentation for the action item and then questions.
Yeah, that's how I would do it.
Yep.
Do a scheduled public comment and then you ask any questions you want, because there's no decision to, it's really just more informative. So you get some background on the process and you can ask questions about what are done in other communities or whatever.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like a 2-hour presentation or something. That was kind of, so.
I think he will tailor it to whatever you want.
But you
So-
start at 5:30 now, so you know we can go.
So we can stay till-
Yeah, till midnight.
Maybe longer. So I will get with actually I'll have Jim get with the contractor and see what he thinks like how long he thinks a presentation will be. And we'll try and make that a little more interactive so that you can have plenty of questions, because there will be there's a lot of technical aspects to impact fees and how that works. A quick snow removal update for you in case you're not reading the Public Works Facebook page. If you're not, I highly recommend it. A lot of information out there, and Faith has done a great job of transferring all those posts into news articles on the webpage. If you go back and show them where that is on the webpage, that would be great. Right there's the snow removal schedule. So it gives people updates on what's going on as far as snow removal. So just a quick update. So since the 25th of February, we've got over 50 hours of overtime per employee so far. We've done B to Lewis, Park between B and Second, Calendar between B and Second, and Mainstream between Park and Geyser, and all those were actually removed, not just plowed. A lot of that snow was removed. I think the snow's still out at Second right now. I think it's drifted up on Second. Well, not drifted up. They piled it in the center.
Yeah, Wind Row. Yeah.
Yep. So Saturday we did Geyser 5th and 9th Streets. We plowed them, and we do have to send a thank you out to Rural Fire that lent us their grader so that we have 2 graders to plow with instead of 1. So that's been doubling how much work we can get done. So thanks to Rural Fire. On Monday they did Calendar, Lewis, and Clark. On Tuesday they did O Street to Main Street on the north-south streets. Scheduled for Wednesday is 2nd to 13th on the north-south streets. Thursday will be Gallatin, Chinook, Montana, and Summit. Friday will be Garnier to Yellowstone on the north side of the tracks. And then they'll finish the north-south streets west of Yellowstone early next week. So that's what's been done and what's coming up. It's been a ton of work. Throw in 3 water main breaks in that time, and we've been pretty much, I think they got the final service line put in on basically all we've done is isolated the main that's been breaking. There were 4 services on it. We've moved them to other parts of the main. And so now we're going to shut that particular piece of main off and then work on repairing it when it's not 25 below. So if you want to see dedicated guys, Sunday night I was out by the Verizon store, 10:30 at night, and there's 6 feet down in 2 feet of water. We gelled up the backhoe. The propane for the heater was so cold it liquefied, so the heater wouldn't run. It was cold, and they got a lot of good work done. So kudos to those guys. That's your snow removal update. And now for a very, I think, great update from MRL. I got an email from their chief communications officer today. After talking with the president, they have instructed their operation teams in Livingston not to switch cars between 7 and 9 in the morning or between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. So that doesn't mean the crossing won't be closed. It doesn't mean there won't be trains going through, but it means they're not going to be tearing them down and building them up during those timeframes. So they've made an operational change for us to help traffic flow on 5th Street. So thank
Get a
you.
hallelujah.
So thank you to MRL. The new president and the new communication officer are very, very community minded, and we had a great meeting with them.
Yeah, Michael and I met with MRL about a month ago.
About a month
Yeah.
ago. So hopefully that will help at least relieve some of the congestion at Fifth in those timeframes. There shouldn't be any long delays of 15 to 20 minutes or 30 minutes where they're breaking down trains. It should just be the 2 to 7 minutes as trains pass through.
I just want to make sure Jonathan has a chance to get all that down.
I'll make my wife.
He knows where to find me.
He knows about, okay, that's good.
That is all I have.
City Commissioner comments. Melissa?
Yeah, I have just a couple things. I'm gonna do my best to keep it short. So, for the planning and zoning boards, or the planning board and the zoning commission, is there a way we can like publicize the descriptions of what activities happen in each space? Because I feel like there might be some confusion.
I can cut and paste out of that guide. Where would you like them published?
No, what makes sense? Maybe, I know you have that nice public notice that they're there, but those public notices already went out. Where on the website would make sense? On the planning,
Under boards?
on the planning
Don't,
board section
We could. That's actually part of the standard board
that's coming.
manual that I'm working on is for each board to have a creation, authority, purpose, funding.
I think it might just help with applications, so people understand. I think sometimes maybe people are applying for planning when they really think that, when they're really wanting zoning. Yeah, anyway. I was going to ask you, how many applications have we gotten for those yet? Do you know?
I don't have the current count. I know at least 2 or 3 for planning and 1 for zoning, but I don't have the current count. Do you know total? Okay, so 2 for planning and 1 for zoning.
Okay, thanks. Another thing I wanted to share was the last planning board meeting, there was some concern from some of the members about a point that Michael made that citizens cannot apply for more than one board, or they can't serve on more than one board. And there was some concern, folks thought that that wasn't accurate, that it in fact was possible to serve on more than one board. So I did some due diligence, some homework, and it sounds like there's nothing legally in the law that prohibits people from serving on more than one board. However, it's really up to the commission, and some things to consider would be, the obvious that we have a hard time filling boards. But alternatively, stacking our boards with all the same people might not be what we're looking for as a commission. It's likely that we're looking for diverse representation of our community across boards. So those are some things that we should consider when we have the opportunity to appoint people. So I just wanted to share what I learned with you all, since that concern was, people have some strong feelings about that topic. So I wanted to share with you what I learned. Yeah, I think people have some strong feelings. It's like my mom, you're getting like my mom way of talking about things right now. There's some really strong feelings about how many boards people can sit on. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was, I've talked a little bit with Michael about this, but there's an alternative to the cash in lieu approach for parkland dedication that we might want to consider. And so I would like that to go on the agenda maybe next meeting, so we can talk about the proposal from the planning board, and then an alternative idea for parkland dedication. And I can share information with Michael so he can put it together in a cohesive way to present to us.
do we have space on the next agenda?
We always have space. Yeah, we could, it'll fit. I don't think there's a ton of stuff on the next agenda right now.
Or it could wait. It could probably wait till if we need to skip one too. I don't think there's a huge rush. We don't have a planning board right now.
If we have bigger resolutions and such, but I don't know how many we have coming up. I don't feel like there's a lot. So there might be space. Why don't we try, and then if it is loaded, if you wouldn't mind moving it to the next one just for time.
That sounds perfect. Yeah.
All right,
And that's it. Thank you.
thanks.
Oh, and I want to thank everybody all the public that commented. I always think that's makes our meetings better. I just have to say that before I say I'm done. So thanks for commenting, public.
Warren.
The only thing I can think of is, and this is kind of down the road a bit, is having to do with zoning ordinances. I think some of the variances that have been asked for in the past have been pretty legitimate. And I think some of the ordinances are either outdated or should be revised. I mean, when you see streets where every house is right up to the sidewalk and there's a new construction in one lot and they have to stay back 25 feet and the lot's already small. Things like that. And I'm not focusing on just that one item. I think that house size and other things have been already covered with for other topics. But I think that the ordinances for zoning might deserve a tweaking. That's it.
Mel?
Yeah, I'd just like to end on a good note. I've been looking at my March calendar and some notes of interest. March 10th is daylight savings time. 17th is St. Patty's Day. Our next meeting is the 19th, and the day after is the first day of spring, and I'm holding this calendar responsible for that wording, first day of spring. So, thank you for all coming tonight. Appreciate it.
I want to give a shout out to the Public Works and everybody who's been involved in snow removal. It's been difficult. I know that, but you've done a great job, and thank you to the public for being patient with it as well. Most people know we're just not set up for storms like this when it comes, and you just have to be patient. Yeah, and I observed the water main breaks. Oh man, that one on 7th. That was 21 below when they were dealing on that one. I just kudos, guys. I've been out there in that, and just man. But anyway, great job.
I am also going to thank the community and the city for all the hard work that they put into helping each other this last week. It was crazy. I know in my neighborhood, one point, someone was just trying to move a car and I was shoveling, and within 1 minute, there were 6 different people coming out of their houses to help. And I saw that all over the place. And also I have to give it to Shannon Holmes too for, I was at a play on Saturday night and I saw him up at the top and I was at the bottom, and he had this look and his head was down. And I was like, oh, and I knew it. I could tell that it was a water main, like by his, and so he's at a play or at the musical at the Shane, Mamma Mia, you guys should all go. But he was even dealing with it at a Saturday night during a musical. So I know he's just one of the many people working hard in our community to help out. And so I'm really proud of how we are and what we do. So
I have one more thing
Nope.
I forgot.
done.
This concerns the Livingston Police Department.
Oh,
As
yes.
chair of the board of Meals on Wheels here in Livingston, thank you again to the police department for delivering meals. It's incredible. Thank you.
Nice picture.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
Okay.
Thank you. So do we have a motion from the commission for adjournment? So there, don't change that word. Do we have a second?
Yes,
Oh,
so moved.
Oh, yeah. Just wait for you to say that.
I was left for a long
second.
time.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Schwartz, or wait, Newts. Roll call, please. Yes.
Or?
4.
This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is adjourned at 7:30. I don't know how that happened.
I figured it was gonna.